I would say that what we've achieved in 6 months using that platform would have taken us 2 years. I look at what we've got now and the system that we've managed to create, and very easily I can quantify the saving back into the business.
Hi everyone, Skalk and Gareth here from Intent Architect. As always, Gareth is phoning in from Amsterdam and I'm calling in all the way from Cape Town in South Africa. And we're very excited to welcome you guys to another Intent Architect case study interview. And joining us today is Rowan Ziman, the Chief Technology Officer at a company called Teljoy. Welcome, Rowan, and thank you for joining us.
Guys, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just to quickly introduce Rowan. So Rowan has more than a decade's worth of experience as a software engineer and technology consultant and started his career at Siemens. He then moved on to work for many other companies, including the global consulting house Accenture, and he's been the CTO at Teljoy now for the last 2.5 years. Teljoy, on the other hand, is a medium-sized consumer goods business with a focus on own-to-rent appliances and furniture. And they were actually the company to install the first TV set in South Africa back in 1974. So Rowan, for starters, and before I hand you over to Gareth, do you mind giving us a high-level feel for what it is you guys do at Teljoy?
We are a service-based business. We now refer to it as a subscription-based business for anything in your home, for a lifestyle that you want. It gives you the flexibility to have anything in your home, and we're no longer just TVs, right? It's literally anything. We are, we do fridges, we do furniture, we do outdoor stuff, we do gas appliances, we do electronics all around the home, we do gaming consoles. The product is to infinity. That's, there are so many options that we offer. Obviously, we need to limit them, but the ethos is always there. We try to maintain always a good customer experience, and that's what we're pushing for constantly.
Great, Rowan. I just want to once again welcome you to this case study today, and thanks again for joining us. I think, obviously it's been a very fascinating journey with you guys, working with specifically some of the consultants that also have been working for you guys as part of this journey. Maybe we could start the conversation with a little bit of the background context and some of the, what you guys do from a technical point of view at Teljoy.
So there's quite a few different streams that we run, but effectively over the past few years, we have been attempting to refresh the current legacy business systems which run the business, and in particular those which influence the user experience and our customer experience on whichever channel it may be. And that's been tremendously difficult because in the environment, a lot of these systems are 20 years old or over 20 years old. The engineers who created those systems are long gone from the business. Very little documentation to explain why things were done architecturally or from a process point of view. And what's that meant for my team is, you need to unscramble what's been done, understand it before you can move forward. One of the challenges has been, how do you modernize a 52-year-old business, and now we're 54 years old. How do you modernize a business like that where you've got very little information? There have been many challenges leading up to this. Over the last few years I've been here, and we've modernized applications. They haven't really yielded the results that I would have expected, due to a myriad of reasons, which we can go through. But it's left me quite frustrated. You're trying to change, you're trying to move this gigantic ship sailing through the ocean, and you want to try and pivot, but what's holding you back is your technical debt, and you can't just throw it out, right? I mean, the train is still moving. So what do you do? And I don't think that's a unique problem to Teljoy by no means. That I think a lot of older companies face the same challenge. The question is, how do you deal with that and keep the business moving?
100%. And what made you guys start looking for different ways to address some of these challenges?
It's a very good question. I think as we started to, just to jump in and sunset some of these legacy applications, I think we continuously tried new things. One of the initial approaches was shifting stuff, utilizing the value of the cloud, from a resource perspective. and that did yield very good results. But what we found that as we progressed through, the applications themselves, regardless of where they're housed, if it's on-prem or in a private data center somewhere, that's actually irrelevant. Because what we found was the application itself on the initial creation was fine, but the support of that became a challenge, even for the new ones which we had created. The newest one that I was involved in was from 2017. And after a year of creating that application, I was back to square one, where my team of developers had left for various reasons. And the new team that had taken on that project, we had the same challenge. We had to unscramble what had been done. We looked at the architecture and we said, why were these decisions made? Why was this done in the way it was done, particularly in the new era of trying to create good stuff for the business that would last and be future proof and future fit. A year later, it wasn't. What had gone wrong? So we had to try something new, and we tried various things. And I think that at that point, luckily we came across you guys. And I think that's actually been one of the major shifts in our movement forward.
I mean, once you guys have come across Intent Architect, what are the key things that made you decide to give it a try in the first place?
Any supplier that we find, and for myself particularly, I often get very excited with any of these things, and I approach them with cautious optimism. I think what I've found over the years is people present something, and the person who often presents is a salesman who is not necessarily technical. And the word that I often hear is, in the world of technology, anything is possible. This is the normal statement I hear from all of these companies, no matter how big. And obviously I'm not going to name them, but very big companies. And what happens is we go on these sort of MVP or POC cycles, and then it turns out, there's problems with the platform, and we're stuck, and I can't do what they say they can do. And all of my excitement is down the toilet, because what I'd perceived to be in place is no longer in place, and all I've done is lost money and lost time. So I think when it came to intent architecture, I did approach it in the same way. I think what was presented to me was novel. It was not something I'd ever considered. It was not something that I ever thought about in terms of maybe we should try standardize the architecture and have a tool that can manage it for us. It was not something ever that I considered. For me, that was something which we had conceived upfront in a project, and very difficult to maintain. The automation of that was never even on the cards. So during that presentation, that was quite novel. And again, I think we approached it with that cautious optimism. We took a month using it just to see, is it something that's really, can it do really what they say it can do? And I don't know if you'll remember my reservations and the calls I had with you around. I needed to see it. I'm a very visual person. I couldn't actually understand what you were saying in the initial conversations. I couldn't understand how this thing, when it came, when the rubber hit the road, how this thing would actually operate. And I think that was the start of the relationship. As we've gone through and over the last few months and years of using it, it's really proven itself to be a catalyst.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to that experience, and we see that in the industry all the time, right? There is a barrage of products, software products out there that are sold in a certain way that can be misleading. And I think that one of the questions I've got is that as you got to understand more about intent architect and applied more and more in the space, what was your feeling around that in terms of what was originally described and promised in the beginning?
So I don't think what you guys originally described was even a tip of the iceberg. I think what we had originally understood, or at least myself, what the tool can do for us. It's what's done for us since then has been magnitudes more. We had never conceived, or at least I've never conceived, an environment where the architecture and the maintenance of that is almost taken care of. That's a non-starter. That's not a conversation. the conversation that we're really having, and I think that's the stuff that we should be having as a team, is that which provides value to the business, because architecture doesn't. If you go and talk to the business about the architecture, they actually couldn't care. They're going to say, well, just make it work, right? They don't care. They don't understand it. And that doesn't give value to anyone. So now the conversations which we're really having with them is value adds. What can we do and how quickly can we do it? And that's a tremendous shift, right? Because, the big play for an IT department in any business is the shifting of an order taker to a value creator and a value partner to the business. And that's very hard to achieve in a development environment where the language between the two is misinterpreted or misunderstood. When you're speaking in language that's universal, and I think that's what domain-driven design tries to achieve, that sort of thing. But again, the architecture has to be set up to achieve that. We're having conversations, and I think we're having our conversations around the value. If for whatever reason there needs to be an architectural shift, it's not an issue for us. Guys flick a switch, and I say that loosely, but almost, flick a switch, and we can do that. So I think that for me has probably been the biggest shift in the way that we are seen and the way that we communicate back within the organization.
Yes, and I mean, it's very interesting that you say that, because when we look at software systems, as you expressed it, what the software does is actually the asset, but the code base is almost like the other side of the balance sheet. It's the liability. It's, the architecture needs to be sound in order for us to achieve that value. All the coding standards need to be there so that we can continuously shift it and maintain, so that we can add the value. So it's almost like that other side of the equation. And from the sounds of it, that's where, you guys, maybe you could tell us a little bit of how you guys initially pushed Intent Architect into the environment, and what were some of the, the tech stacks and architectural approaches you took there. But it sounds like that was something that now was no longer an issue for you guys. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that.
When we found this platform, I think what it did for us is it gave us something tangible to talk to from an architectural perspective. We adopted the simplest architecture that you guys had out the box, which was, I think, the clean architecture, which we adopted immediately. The guys who weren't fully clued up with it, I bought them all books, and they went away to read everything that they could read on it, and it was quite natural and fluid that everyone agreed with the methodology. And almost overnight, it was actually quite amazing, because almost overnight there was no longer disagreements in terms of what should we do. And I think to a large degree, that's also got to do with an architecture that has already been implemented by smart people all over the world. And I think, in a sense, what that does to the developers is it means this has already been stamped. There's a stamp of approval, not just by me, but by other developers. I don't need to show how good I am as a developer. I don't need to do more. I don't need to recook this and change something, because everyone's in agreement that this has been implemented in the best way possible. And if we need to iterate, well, we can. We can change things and nuances later on. But at a starting point, you've got full agreement on where we are and what we're trying to achieve. And I think that was probably how that buy-in and happened from day one, and obviously how we maintain that architecture, at least the tool to do that. That's where we've been.
What did you guys, if you had to try summarize it, what were some of the main achievements and main benefits that you guys got from Intent Architect within, you could say, the first 6 months to a year of working with it?
I think probably the biggest thing, again, which I was cautiously optimistic about, and I'd probably say maybe even a bit pessimistic, is the claim that we could realize an efficiency and productivity improvement in the development team. I would say that what we've achieved in 6 months using that platform would have taken us 2 years. I look at what we've got now and a system that we've managed to create, and very easily I can quantify the saving back into the business, and I can say to anyone, to our board who I often talk to, or the CEO, what we've managed to do and where we are right now as a business, it's been a long-term strategy that we've managed to realize exceptionally quickly. And I think that has got to be due to intent, because I can guarantee that we'll still be sitting here right now, wiring everything up, arguing over the architecture, arguing over the implementation of the concepts in the framework that we're using. That's a non-discussion. So that for me has definitely been the massive value add, and I can see it and I can quantify it, at least with the assumptions that I've got.
I know. At the beginning, you spoke about some of the old legacy systems, Rowan. That when new developers had to come in, there was a question of why is this the way it is, and the visibility and so on and so forth. And things were very hard to you could say comprehend and backward rationalize what was really going on there. Was there any effect that you feel? I mean, if you had to swap your team out at this point, or if you had to, for example, bring in a whole bunch of new developers, what would you expect from that perspective at this point?
Do you mean while using intent?
Yeah, absolutely. So with intent, I mean, coming back to some of the early challenges that you talked about with regards to not having a clear visibility on the systems, the documentation, why certain decisions were made in the first place, and so on and so forth. Now with Intent Architect in there for these projects, if you had to bring in new developers, or there was any kind of shift around in which developers are working on it, what kind of effect do you anticipate on that front?
Yeah, so I think anytime you're going to onboard a new development team, whether it is internal, local, consulting, not, whatever it may be, there's always going to be a ramp up time. And I think the ramp up time is usually a mixture of a whole bunch of things. And one of those needs to be the actual architecture itself and understanding your environment and how your environment works. Only once that's been achieved can you then start talking about domain knowledge and talking about the business domain knowledge, not the architectural domain knowledge, in terms of how do the business rules manifest themselves in a system, why are they done, and what are you trying to achieve from a value add back into the business. That can take months to achieve. You can argue that your ramp up time for a developer can be anywhere between 3 to 6 months where you can start offering value into the business, and that's being optimistic. I think what this has done is provided that the developers is fluent with intent architecture, that removes that whole ramp up time from that perspective. And I'm not talking about a junior here. I'm talking about somebody who comes with experience into an environment. And all you need to do at that point is ramp them up into the business domain knowledge. And case in point, which we saw in the past 2 months, was exactly what happened with this new software dev house that we've onboarded. They came in, and one would have expected them to have a ramp up time, which is what I catered for. They were almost, I would say it took us between 3 to 6 weeks to get them up to speed into our business and starting to provide value back in. And yes, we're still having discussions around why decisions are being made. But again, these are all decisions around the business domain knowledge, not got anything to do with the system itself.
I mean, if you had to hypothetically look at replacing one of the legacy systems that you guys haven't got round to, if you had to compare that or imagine how that would go if you did it in the traditional sense versus using Intent Architect, what kind of difference would you imagine or could you expect to see there?
Yeah, so it's quite an easy question, because we did remember I said in 2017 we did a system reroute, and we found, and again a year later we found that it became stale again. I think what this could do is, if one of my smaller systems, I'm just thinking out loud here, if one of my smaller systems could take me a year, 6 months to a year to reroute, it becomes, and these are not complicated systems, by the way. A lot of these systems are literally just processing and workflows. I would imagine that intent would give us the ability, because the architecture has already been defined and agreed upon holistically, we could rewrite these systems, I reckon, within 2 to 3 months.
So once again, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to the future.